Hello? Oh, yes, great. So we're going to get started. I know there's some people that are still coming through, but hopefully they won't miss too much. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last day of the European Tableau Conference. We hope that you've enjoyed and learned a lot from the sessions that you've attended so far, and that you also had a great night at the party. We'd like to thank you, first of all, for attending our session. My name is Alina, and together with my colleague Alison, we hope to leave you at the end of the session with practical advice on how to transform your analytics with your business questions. Yesterday, during the keynote, we have announced the Tableau Blueprint, which is a guide to becoming a data-driven organization. Now, the Tableau Blueprint is based on 3 core capabilities: agile deployment, analytics proficiency for the users, and the user community. Our session is focused on analytics proficiency, which includes user education, increased data literacy, and best practices.
So, am I on yet? Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce you all to Alina. Now, before joining Tableau, Alina was a Tableau customer, and she was very enthusiastic as a customer. She attended every Tableau meeting you could imagine, Tableau user groups, Tableau conferences, everything. And even now, there's still visualizations online where she's cataloged everything from Tableau conference. She's always up to speed with the latest community news, Tableau Zen Masters, Workout Wednesdays, Makeover Mondays, everything like that. And she also runs the Tiny Tableau Talks London Meetup user group.
Now, Alison's background is in biomechanics and designing research methodologies. She joined Tableau because she's primarily interested in using visual analytics as a method of understanding data. Alison is also part of the Tableau Service Corps, which means that she helps nonprofits around the world to use Tableau to enhance and accelerate their mission.
So we wanted to share this fun photograph of us both, because not only do we have lots of Tableau t-shirts in common, we also have Harry Potter merchandise in common. And in this particular example, we're in the same place at the same time, which, although we are here together today, it's quite rare. Normally, we are traveling around Europe to work with our customers, so we spend most of the time on the road. This is a nice visualization we put together, which shows that we, in the past 18 months, have worked with 51 different customers across 21 industries in 7 different countries.
Now, our focus as part of the professional services team within Tableau is to really help customers understand how to use Tableau. And a key thing to this, we think, is the speed and power of visual analytics. It really just happens that Tableau builds dashboards or reports to achieve this.
So, just to run through what we're going to cover this morning. So, we're going to cover a couple of different approaches to a problem. The first approach is a very typical scenario, something that we experience when we go on site. So it's the type of thing that you would expect to see, or certainly we expect to see, when somebody has recently made the commitment to work with Tableau, but they're expected to somehow migrate existing reports using Tableau as their new tool. And then approach 2, we will talk through how you can do it the Tableau way. So we won't do too many spoilers right now, but it's an alternative approach to the kind of typical thing that we see. And then at the end, we'll do a few key takeaways for those of you still awake. So why are we doing this talk? When Alina and I had the opportunity to speak at Tableau Conference, this was something that we were really enthusiastic about sharing. This is brand new content today that we've put together, and we really felt there was a gap between the customers that we were seeing. We wanted to help them really transform what they were doing, but there's a big chasm between that and the amazing things that we see on Tableau Public, which aren't always directly related to a big enterprise business who has very specific reporting requirements. So we wanted to try and bridge that gap a little bit. we felt there was a gap in some of the content. So hopefully, after this session, you'll have some ideas about what you can bring back to your own organizations and projects.
But before we start, we'd like to know a bit more about you. So which of the above do you do most in your day-to-day job? Please raise your hand if you spend more than 50% of your time building dashboards or reports.
I do too.
Great. Next, do we have anybody here managing people, projects, making decisions? Mm-hmm. And do we have anyone managing infrastructure, databases, Tableau server?
Okay, so we've got quite a good mix, actually. This is really good news for us, because one of the key things that we think is really important is that those people who are in any of these groups should be collaborating from the beginning of a Tableau project. Nobody who has tasks, and we're particularly talking about the people who might be building the dashboards, or the IT people, the people on the infrastructure or databases side, these are not people who should be brought in towards the end once something's been decided. It really should be collaborative from the beginning. So we're really excited to see that there's a good mix. We weren't 100% sure if we would get a good mix, so that's great to see.
Right, so the examples that we're going to be showing you today are based on analysis that we've done for customers we worked with in the past. Now, as you may expect, these are actually using customers' data, which obviously we won't be able to share with you. But because we really wanted you to see some of the dashboards and analysis that we've done with them, we have used instead the sample EU Superstore dataset, which you're probably very aware of by this time. Now, you know that this dataset comes with Tableau and is designed as a dummy sales dataset with the usual dimensions, the segment that help you to segment your data, and measures like numerical value, sales profits that we usually aggregate.
Now, although we're using Sample Superstore, we can't stress enough how the pain and the joy that you will see in the dashboards that follow are absolutely real. And I think you might recognize, I hope you'll recognize some of this. So in our first approach, I'm going to talk through a kind of typical scenario. So like I said, when we first go on site with somebody, we tend to be brought in at the end of this stage. So somebody calls professional services and say, our dashboard isn't performing well, people are saying it doesn't look so great. I'm going to talk through the kind of process that we understand goes on before we come on site. Now, while I talk through this, it would be great if you could see in your minds kind of where you think some of the projects you've been involved in are, to kind of gauge it. But we're pretty confident that some of you, if not many of you, will recognize some of this pain. So first comes the specification. So we start with an email. We need to reproduce our existing report. So far, so familiar. Needs to have everything that we currently have as a business, but now that we've bought Tableau, it needs to be a little bit shinier, but we don't know how or why, but that's fine. We've got a few things that we know we need to see because it's on our existing report. Monthly breakdown of sales figures. We want to view details for last year and this year. There's some color coding on our existing report, so we don't want to lose that, and it's driven by regions. And then the email finishes. We also have some raw data. Some people use it, some people don't. One of the reasons we've invested in Tableau is because we know we can get everybody to use the same data sets and something about that. So there's lots of things in there that we're not using well enough. Can you see if you can just bring in that data too onto the dashboards? Okay. Report attached. So, okay. I see this all the time. I know we're in a dark room, bright lights, making your eyes bleed. It's painful, but we'll go through what this means, because somebody's been asked to recreate this report. The specification isn't great, but they still need to do it. So you can break down this report in different ways because it hasn't happened by accident. So what do we know? We know that not all dimensions are actually how we would need the dimensions to be in Tableau. So for example, the central region, in this case, has been typed in manually in a cell. That's not a data structure, that's somebody putting some text in a cell. So we know that there's some manual processes going on. There's some expandable functionality. So those of you familiar with Excel, which I'm sure many of you are, we can show and hide a bunch of rows. So there's something going on there. So in this particular report, the expandable functionality enables you to expand and contract on the month-by-month view. Okay. There's an unusual highlight in blue of the annual trend. But what's it in reference to? What can we compare it to? Mystery, but it's there. And then we have color, which is used to encode values. So for those of you not familiar with encoding, we talk about encoding when you're using color to add meaning to the data. So it's not illustrating it, it's adding meaning. So in this particular case, we do have some encoding. Not always the best choice, but it's there. It's green for good, red for bad. This is something else that I see a lot, which is the users are so familiar with using this particular report, they don't even know how ugly it is anymore. And they know exactly where to look for their part of the report. So for example, here, a little bit difficult to see, but along the edge you can see that you've got the scroller, which can go down for quite a way. So although everything is technically in the same place, people know that they need to go to row 50 for their part of the report. That's something else that's there. Okay, and then this is one of my favorites, but also the worst, which is the ability to look up values in one place and compare them in another place. And it was only 2 weeks ago when somebody said to me they needed a report, not this one, a report to do this so they could use their eyeballs to look at one piece of paper and compare it with another piece of paper. This is not analytics for me. And then we have raw data availability. So down here, we've got our monthly by country report, which is the colorful one, and then there's some raw data, so people can access that if they want to, but it's all stored locally. So what does somebody do when they have this situation? They've been told to recreate it exactly. So they start with Tableau. They start with a suitable wireframe. Very good start. They might have a template. They build the same table. They've put the same color coding in. And having the same table can be useful for some reasons. It can help with user acceptance. So it's not that it's a bad idea, and they were asked to do it, so it's in there. They've also added in a line chart. Now this is probably the better parts of this dashboard I'm going to talk through, because it actually enables you to compare one year with another. So very suitable chart choice. You've got the comparison values year on year, and it adds some visual context to that table. So this is one of the things that's really bringing the table alive in this one. So someone's really thought about the purpose of comparison. And as I'm talking through this kind of not so great dashboard, we see it all the time, and it's really to show that we understand where these things come from, but there is a better way to do it. Okay. And then they've added in a map. Maps are great. We love maps. But this one adds some visual context. They've added an action filter, because we can do that, so that's very exciting, now that they're not using Excel. And this is starting to look really familiar, isn't it? Okay, loads of filters. So there are benefits to this. There's lots of things somebody can do with this. There's lots more functionality compared to the previous report. They've even, for it to even have these, they must have optimized the data set in some way. So when I said someone was typing something in, No longer are they typing it in to generate the report because it has to be a proper field that can be read. So there are benefits of just even creating this because the data set had to be optimized. And we also have a nice little Excel export for those people who really don't want to use Tableau. I hope there's nobody here who would be like that. But anyway, so this is what we end up with. And yeah, it looks like a dashboard. It kind of does look like it's been built in Tableau, although hopefully this wouldn't make it to Tableau Public, for one. OK, so what are the typical complaints that we would hear about when somebody says, we built a dashboard, but we don't like it? So the functionality and performance issues. So as it uses the original table format as the key requirement, and some of you will have probably noticed, it doesn't quite recreate the original table. It has much of the same information, but it's not exactly the same. So the people who really wanted that old table are not going to be happy anyway. There's poor performance due to too many filters. Not rocket science, but it's there. And many marks are displayed in the table by default. So there's no kind of performance optimization done. So what we mean by that is with the table, when it's first being loaded, everything's coming back into the table. There's no kind of pre-filter or nothing there until somebody makes a selection. So Tableau's having to work harder for basically no users. User experience. So there's no structure to this content. You don't really know where to look and how to interact with it. The usability is really low. So there's not even any subtitles or any of the kind of typical interactivity that we would talk about when we're thinking about best practices, telling people that they can use the filters, for example, or telling them that the axis for the line chart is, in this particular case, it's not aligned with the table, so you can't really tell if 2018 is part of one axis or the table header. The intended audience is too broad, so this is something that we would typically see when we see this many filters. When we start asking more questions about having this many filters, turns out one filter is for one person in one department, another filter is for one person in another department. Everybody's trying to use a single filter. It's not great. The action filter is duplicated by a quick filter. Not in itself a problem. So what I mean by that is the action filter on the map is duplicated with one of the gray filters. Not a massive problem, but because there's no instructions, it can be quite confusing once somebody's clicked something, what's going on. And there's color confusion. So the power of encoding is lost because the way the map colors, although it's the same field, it's not using color in exactly the same way. There's some additional colors in the map that aren't reflected in the table, so we don't quite know if it means the same thing or it doesn't. And finally, look and feel. So there's inconsistent colors and branding. So it's not essential for every dashboard to have corporate branding, but it does make it look less professional when you've got a suite of tools. The colors are inconsistent, and that's because it's relied on what I call an edited default, which is a pet hate of mine, because the limits of Tableau 10 and Tableau 20, you don't have to use them. There are loads of other color palettes. You can make your own. But we see this a lot when somebody has used the very, very basic default settings, but then overlaid their old custom colors or color scheme. You have this mismatch of the two of them. It doesn't look professional at all, which is a shame because the data might be accurate, and then the believability of that data is lost, even though it's literally just a matter of changing the color. And then finally, this is a top tip from me. There's no padding on this. If you don't use padding, please start using padding. It makes your dashboards look way more professional, and it's zero effort. What padding is for every single element on the dashboard, every different sheet or object you've got on there, you can add in space around that. And that makes a big, big difference to the way something looks. So In summary, what went wrong? Report replication, poor planning. So can't stress that enough. There was no planning. There was an email, and it was like, recreate what we have. This means there's not really a vision for scale. Of course, you could repeat this process over and over and over again, but you're not really thinking holistically about what you're trying to achieve across all of your reports. You're just reproducing something. The analyst is trying to please everyone, doesn't please anybody. And this is also a big point. Reporting culture, not an analytics culture. And we see this a lot. So the numbers are prioritized over the context of those numbers. We're not saying don't use numbers, not at all. We're saying people need context for those numbers to be able to make decisions and take actions. And when you're just recreating something with purely numbers, it's much, much harder for people to do that. But the requirements were broadly met. There were improvements with automation regardless, centralized reporting, and they've got Tableau, and there was an opportunity for collaboration. We don't know how much collaboration might have happened here. So where do we stand? Poor performance, inadequate look and feel, there'll be maintenance issues, and lack of dashboard focus. So what do they do? Where do we go from here, apart from call?
Thank you, Alison. OK, so let's go on to approach number 2, which is the Tableau Way. So next, we'll be sharing with you our approach for analytics best practices. And we hope this is going to be much better than the example that Alison just walked us through. So where do we start? Now, we start with a good plan. The first thing would be to understand the goals and gather the requirements. So what would this be? This is finding out what the actions and what are the key takeaways from your dashboards, and how are users going to use it, and also translate that into a business question. OK, great. But what are some of the key questions to ask during the requirements gathering process? Now, this really, really depends on the customer scenario. But in most cases, as analysts, we should ask these 4 key questions. First, do we know what this dashboard is going to achieve? What's the purpose? Why am I building this? Have I identified my audience? And this could be from anyone from your executive team, sales managers, individual sales leads, the analysts themselves. How are we going to distribute this report? Is it desktop, laptop, mobile? And finally, is the data source ready to use in Tableau? Do we have all the fields? Are they aggregated at the right level? Is row-level security required?
So in this case, obviously, our data source is ready because it's Sample Superstore, but it's never ready when we go on site, ever. But we don't have time to show you all of that headache today, so.
I really agree with Alison here, and I actually think we can all agree that a clean data source ready to use in Tableau Desktop can be a really big challenge for starting a new project. So let's see how we can put this in practice into Tableau. Now next, we're going to go through 3 typical business questions and 3 corresponding dashboards. So our first business question is, where do we sell the most? Now this question comes from sales managers, but it also applies to individual sales leads. So the requirements that we've identified in this case are, can I look at the quantity and sales value? Can I split that by different segments in my data, country, manufacturers, shipping mode? Can I apply a filter? And also a filter for date range, of course. I'm gonna need this report on desktops or laptops. However, there are some goals to keep in mind, and as analysts, we must never forget this. What are these? These are the best practices. Now, in most cases, we do want to take an action from dashboards. So, for example, we want to identify top 3 countries where we sell the most to know where to focus on. Then, if we can make it easy to use, there's likely to be more people actually using your dashboards. Next, why would we want an adaptable, configurable dashboard? because it allows us to answer multiple questions. And let's not forget about performance, because who wants to use a dashboard that's slow to load? The good thing is that Tableau makes it easy to achieve these goals quickly. We hope you agree with us on that. So let's go through the requirements. The first one would be to look at the sales and quantity value, and this can be done with a simple drop-down parameter selection. Next, we have identified 10-dimensional categorical fields that the audience wants to segment the data by. Only one of the fields is required at a time, which then again makes it easy for us to use parameters to swap between the different fields. And lastly, we would like to filter to a specific time period, achieved through a simple relative date filter. So let's see how this looks like in Tableau. Okay, great. So this is our proposed dashboard to answer the question, where do we sell the most? So let's start analyzing this dashboard. Now, at the top left corner here, we have the filters and parameter dropdowns, the ones that we've just discussed briefly. The dashboard itself contains 3 main dashboards. So we have a highlight table. It's a simple table, just adding color on top of it. And in addition, to enhance this visualization even more, we've added 2 additional simple bar charts, once again enhanced with the color, to let the user quickly know what are indeed the top selling segments within your data. So just by looking at this visualization, I can easily see France is my top selling country. I can see that standard class is my preferred shipping method. If I look at weekdays, I can see that Sunday and Monday are my best days. And also, if we look at category, technology and office supplies sell the most in terms of the sales value. But then if I look at the quantity, office supplies actually sells 3 times more items than technology. So this is the first iteration of the dashboard. Now, we are always going back, and I would always encourage you to go back as analysts, go back to your audience, present your dashboard, present your ideas, and gather feedback. So let's see. The initial feedback was positive. They're happy with the dashboard, but they would like an additional requirement. We know France is our top selling country, but can we actually maybe see how they've been selling over time? So a trend by month, weekday. And second, as analysts, we always have to remember the data-inc ratio. And this is a concept that was introduced by Edward Tufte, a pioneer in data visualization, where you always have to remember that the data-inc is the non-erasable ink that helps you to convey the information to your audience. Whereas the non-data ink is the ink that adds background noise, like grid lines. So let's apply this to our dashboard. Now, the final visualization that we're proposing looks something like this. We've only added an additional filter drop-down parameter where the user can select month, week, day. And each individual visualization has been enhanced with a viz in tooltip. So we can easily add this. We no longer know just that France is the highest selling value, we also know how much they've been selling over time. Regarding the data-inc ratio, now in this case, I've decided that perhaps it's better to remove the labels only on the highlight table itself. However, if the user does want to get the actual values, they can always get them, and this is enabled through a highlight action in Tableau. So a couple of things that we think work really well in this dashboard. First would be the visualization type, the color usage, which really hopefully draws the user attention to answer the business question, which is where do we sell the most? We then added quite a lot of interactivity. We have 10 different fields that the user can select, different measures. We have a date range filter as well. And also, let's not forget instructional text for our audience. They will always know what selections they've made. It's right there, right in the title, to reinforce what they're looking at. Okay? Perfect. So that was our first example. So let's now move back to our PowerPoint presentation for the next one.
The great thing that's happened in the transition is that there was a conversation that has clearly happened for this second example compared to the first one. So it was really about what questions are being answered from that first dashboard. What are the actions that actually need to be taken? So that's forming the basis of these other examples.
So let's go on to our next business questions, which is, what are customers buying? Now this question can come from two different departments, marketing and sales. So the requirements, again, that we've identified are that we want to see the customer order details, and we have 10 different filters that we want to filter the data by. So think about these type of questions. Marketing wants to know what products are corporate customers buying that could be part of the next marketing campaign. And in the same time, the sales department is asking us, are there any unprofitable products, and why is that? And then you might ask, why do we need 10 filters? And the typical answer that we receive is that we want to be able to segment the data in every possible way. Does this sound familiar to you as well? Okay, I see people nodding. Great. I mean, not great, but. So let's see how we would actually implement this in Tableau. So once again, let's look through the requirements. To achieve the filtering behavior without adding every single field of the 10 fields as a drop-down filter, which can also lead to poor performance, we can use action filters in Tableau. So each of the 10 fields is an individual visualization. The example that are shown here are simple text tables. So at the top, we have text tables for select region, ship mode, and at the bottom for select subcategory. And then we can also use icons, like the ones that you see in the middle for select category and segment. So these can all be used to filter your dashboard. Next, the metrics that we'll be using in this case are also, again, available through a drop-down parameter, like sales, profit ratio. And finally, similar to the previous example, a relative date filter is required. So let's see how we could implement this into Tableau. Great. Now, the proposed visualization to answer this question is actually split across two dashboards. So once again, at the top, we have our filters. In this case, only two of them, the measure that we're selecting, as well as the date range. We then follow with an explanation of, or a text section that lets you know what filters have been applied to your dashboard. And you will see that by default, everything is included. Of course, that's before you actually apply filters. Even before we start actually applying filters onto your dashboard, I hope that you can get an understanding of what your data looks like. So I can see central region is the highest in terms of sales. Same as standard class, same as France. That's already information that you're getting without doing anything. And information that you would not get through quick drop-down filters. So let's walk through an example. I want to look at what my corporate segment is doing. Within the technology section, and I would like to focus in particular on France because I can see they buy quite a lot, and let's look at the customer order details. So this then takes us to a second dashboard where we continue to drill down through our data. So I can then even further drill down into a particular state. And at the bottom here, I am left with the answer that I was looking for, which is what are customers buying? And not surprising at all, but Nokia seems to be the highest commodity in sample EU Superstore. So let's now go through a second example that applies more to the salespeople, where we would want to understand, okay, do we have any unprofitable products, and why is that? So I'm then going to look at the profit, and straight away, my eye, at least mine, is drawn to the red color that shows up on the table subcategory. So I'm gonna look into tables in particular. The tooltip lets me know that actually that the color is represented by negative profit, that this is actually spread across all regions to ship modes. Let's look into more detail into these bottom three manufacturers, and I want to see what's going on here. So I'm going to go back to your customer order details. Once again, I'm looking at what those customers and manufacturers have been selling, and then I can easily see that the problem seems to be the discounts that have been applied. And let's not forget, we always get an understanding of the selections that we've made, because we always have this informed filtering representation here at the top. Okay, once again, this is our first iteration for the dashboard. So strongly advise you to go back to your audience and collect feedback. The feedback that we receive is that we really like the filtering, the performance is really good, but the one requirement that we always get is, are we able to export the details to Excel? So how we would go about this, there are actually different options that you could go for, different methods to implement this, but with the help of 2018.2, or with version 2018.2, we have extensions in Tableau, and so it really makes it very easy to implement. We've just added an extension to our dashboard. It's called Export All. I'm going to click that, and it's already pre-configured on the table, on the customer order table. I already know what fields I want to look at, so it's one click away to actually get your export. Now, let's go through a couple of things that we think work quite well with the dashboard that you've just seen. So the guided analytics approach, or the informed filtering through action filters, really opens up the eyes for a lot of customers we work with, and this is also really great for performance. You've seen that we've managed to make a very interactive dashboard. The use of color, once again, red in that particular case, it meant negative profits. Everything else was different shades of gray. Let's not forget about the annotations that we have on our dashboard. We always let the user know what to do. Select category, select ship mode. And let them know also what filters they have applied on their dashboard by adding a quick summary for the filters that have been applied. Okay, so that's our second example. Let's now go back to our presentation to introduce our third example.
And final example.
And final example. Okay, oh, it's not there. Oops. Final technical problems. Of course, there's always going to be. So let's do this first. Extend it. Oh, I'm so sorry about this. I did practice, and I did think this would work. So let's go through Tableau. Okay, we're finally there. So our third business question is, what does the year-on-year performance look like? Now, this type of question usually comes from the executive team primarily, and the requirements that they have are, I want to see these five metrics and see how I'm doing this year versus previous year. But also, they would like to see the progress as the year goes by, so a monthly and quarterly comparison. But in addition, we have another audience, for example, our regional directors who would like to see the same type of analysis, but they would like to apply additional filters. Once again, the distribution for this would be desktop or laptop. So let's look at how we would implement this first requirement. As said, all 5 KPIs have to be shown in the same view. And in this case, we can use a similar visualization type for each of the metrics and only apply color coding depending on the result. So an increase would be black, a decrease would be orange. Next, we want to be able to see the progress as the year goes by, and this is achieved through the quarterly monthly comparison between the current year, which is shown by the line, and the previous year, the area chart. Again, only one option is required at a time, which makes it quite easy to implement this via a parameter to allow us to swap between the 2 different options. Lastly, as we've mentioned, another audience is interested in this type of analysis, but they'd like to add some filters. Now, we could just add quick drop-down filters in Tableau, but as we've seen in the previous example, action filters are a great way to achieve the same goal. So each of the 4 fields is an individual visualization. And the examples shown here are simple bar charts that can all be used to filter your dashboard. So let's switch to Tableau to see how this dashboard would look like. Great. So our proposed visualization for the final example that we have available for you today could look something like this one. So let's analyze this dashboard to see what information we can get out of it. Now, at the top, the dashboard has been split into 3 different sections. We start with the year-on-year analysis at the top. And once again, each of the 5 KPIs has its own individual sheet. This year value is represented by the bar chart itself. The previous year value, where possible, depending on the metric that I'm looking at, is referenced with the dotted line. We then go on to our next section of the dashboard, which is a monthly or a quarterly comparison. And once again, the user can easily just swap between the 3 different options. And finally, at the bottom, we have our filters. Right. Now, the visualization currently is enhanced. We are not just getting the drop-down filters. In addition, we're able to, for example, look at the 2019 total sales value for the 4 different segments of your data. Now, this is driven by a select measure, once again, parameter dropdown. Let's look at sales by customer. And I want to look into office supplies in more detail. As soon as I've made my selection, a couple of things change. Visual cue to the user for what choice they've made, as well as updating the text information regarding the filters that have been applied. And finally, right here at the top, I can easily see that we're behind last year in terms of sales by customer and the profit ratio. Great. Once again, first draft that we have available, going back to our audience, you know the drill here. We've done this twice already. And so, again, the feedback it was positive, but the executives would like to see this on a mobile layout. And considering the latest edition of Tableau, the latest version of Tableau, it's really easy to add a mobile layout in Tableau. And a proposed visualization for this mobile layout could look something like this. Remember, our executives don't need to filter the dashboard, so we just removed that part. we only kept the relevant information to our specific audience. We kept our legend, our instructions on how to use this dashboard, and of course the filter. And it's really, really easy to get this information in a mobile format. All you would need to do is really scroll down to have a look at how your KPIs are doing. So what do we think what works well on this particular example? We are focused on answering a specific question. We want to know how our performance looks like. Once again, we've applied informed filtering, minimum use of color, 2 simple colors on your dashboard, and lots of annotations. That dashboard had quite a lot of annotations on the left side to let the user know what they're actually looking at. Instructional test, dashboard summary, filters. We always encourage you to add this on your dashboards. Great. So let's wrap up this, section. Where do we stand with this second approach? A couple of things that we'd like you to take away are, we took time to understand what the goals are for each of your dashboard. We took time to understand the audience, their requirements, and this really helps us to develop an efficient dashboard. Second, we thought about performance at the beginning, not at the end, which is what most of us tend to do. Also, you will see that we think this is an analytics-driven dashboard rather than a report-driven one. We're drilling into our data. We're using best practices. And by doing so, we're keeping in mind colors. We're keeping in mind instructional text. That also leads to, hopefully, a professional look and feel for your dashboard. And let's not forget, we're focusing our dashboard to a narrow audience and one business question. In addition, requirements are met, just like Alison mentioned in the previous approach. Usually, things are improved. However, let's keep in mind the benefits of the approach that we proposed. However, to make this sustainable long-term, there's once again a couple of things to keep in mind. Cultural change, and this involves everyone in your organization, from those of you building your dashboards, to those of you consuming, to those of you managers who formulate requirements and support your analysts. Building a Tableau community, making sure that your users know where to go for the information, know who to ask if they have additional feedback. By the way, there is a session this afternoon between 4 and 5 p.m. It's called How to Build Your User Community and Boost Adoption. We'll have the slide with the name of the session just after. And if you want to learn more about how to build a user community, I strongly recommend that session. And finally, empower and educate your users. It's really important for your analysts to know the capabilities of Tableau and get familiar with best practices.
Okay, so where does this actually all fit in with Blueprint from where we started the presentation? So, as we said, this talk forms part of analytics best practices. However, we can't stress enough how it's really important to have this as part of the analytics strategy. That's because in order to achieve the dashboards that Alina demonstrated, you have to have buy-in from the beginning that this is going to be a change. It can't happen right at the end of the road. It has to be at the beginning with collaboration across different departments. It has to be formed part of the strategy as to why you have reports and BI. So, key takeaways. I hope that everybody has at least come away with some ideas from the dashboards we've presented, mainly from Alina's, not from the headache from earlier. Don't want any ideas from there. But so for those of you that spend a lot of your time building reports, and obviously 3 categories of people, we know that you mix in all of these, but have confidence to redesign based on questions and the actions people are going to take from your reports. That has to be at the root of it. And ask for feedback. So iterate on your dashboards. I also understand sometimes the danger of asking for feedback because it's like a waterfall of change. You can structure that, but do ask for feedback because it helps people then use your dashboards once they're out there in the wild. For those of you who manage people, projects, make decisions, hopefully everybody makes decisions, but business decisions, articulate your requirements in business questions and actions. This really, really, really helps the success of building dashboards. And empower and educate your analytics team. This is really important because if you have people in your team who are learning a new tool, the Tableau community, as I hope you're all aware from being at Tableau conference, is amazing. There is so much out there in terms of support and resources, and building an internal community is also something that's possible for big customers too. And finally, for those of you that work either in IT or with IT, which should be everybody in those two groups, make sure they're part of the collaboration process. Be part of it at the beginning, because these people hold the key to success for your data sources. We didn't talk a lot about data sources today because that's an enormous topic on its own. But having data sources ready for Tableau at the right levels of aggregation, if you have enormous data sets and you want really good performance, your IT people are the people to speak to. They're going to be key in the success. Keep software up to date. So obviously we're going to say that. If you want to make use of all of the nice things that Tableau does in the latest releases, you have to upgrade. Sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but we often end up working on very old versions of Tableau, but are expected to do the really shiny things. So if people have those expectations, please upgrade, if it's a new feature. OK, so how are we doing for time?
We have, I think, 5 minutes for a couple of questions. But before, we really appreciate your feedback. If you really liked our session, please rate us 5 stars and tell us why you liked it. If you didn't like our session, please still rate us 5 stars, but tell us what we can improve. This is new content and would like to improve it and present again if it's relevant. The workbook and presentation will be available to you shortly after the conference. So we can take a few, 2 questions, maybe 3 questions. And actually, we're available to speak right after the session if you have any more specific questions, because I know we're short on time.